right, and we are now live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting. For roll call, Councillor Barber may be joining us later. We're not sure yet. And we'll take a moment of reflection and respect, please. Thank you. The next item up is confirmation of agenda.
That council adopts the agenda for the meeting of July 13th, 2020 as presented.
I need a mover and someone to second it. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Charlton. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, we will move into delegations and public meetings. I welcome Christine Scrimgeour this evening. She's going to do a presentation of the draft 2019 financial statements for the town of Aylmer and the East Elgin Community Complex. So go ahead, Christine.
Okay, thank you so much. I will go through the East Elgin Community Complex first because they are then consolidated into the town's financial statements. I have made this presentation as well to Malahide last Thursday night, I believe it was. So just so you're aware of that. I'll move forward through it. It is a clean auditor's opinion with no reservations, which means I've found nothing to be immaterially incorrect. Materiality for the EECC is $7,500, but fortunately, we were able to get all of our testing done before COVID hit at the arena. And so we look at all transactions are eligible for our statistical sampling, and we found nothing with lacking internal controls or incorrect in that vein. And they are dated in May, which is when we finalize these financial statements. I'll move forward to the statement of financial position, which would be your next page, my page 3. So if you want to come down one there, thank you. So this is, I'll remind the council that most of the transactions flow through the town's bank account. There is a separate bank account for the reserve fund for the complex, but the rest of the transactions flow through. So at the end of the year, there's always a due from town of Aylmer, depending on the position of the financial statements at the end of the year. Net financial assets, again, that's the line where that would be the amount you would have in the bank at the end of the day if everything was paid off, and that's $95,000. The remaining is your tangible capital assets, which is mainly the building and then the land and the equipment that goes with the arena. Coming down to your accumulated surplus at the end of the year of $7.7 million. You'll see that is a decrease from last year, and that's really just the amortization on those capital assets that I mentioned. I'd like to move forward to the next page. This is your revenues and expenditures budgeted 2019 compared to actual, and then actual 2018. I'll remind council that under the expenditures that we do not budget for amortization, so our expenses appear to be over budget, but if you take the $254,000 of amortization out of those actuals, in fact, we're underspent, and we did have a small surplus. Under revenue, there were some additional revenues under other, which were the Canada Helps summer grants that we did take advantage of in 2019 that we didn't in 2018. Coming down to an excess of expenditures over revenue, and again, that reflects that amortization that I mentioned. Coming down to the accumulated surplus at the end of the year of $7.7 million. I won't go through the next two statements in any detail. I'll just forward you to note number 3 of the notes to the financial statements, which really is the breakdown of that surplus. Look down one more page, please. Perfect. Sorry, one more page. Sorry. There we go. So this is shows you what is in your surplus. So you'll see there's a reserve and reserve fund of about $106,000, and then the rest is invested in your tangible capital assets. And as I've mentioned in previous years, building up that reserve and reserve fund for future capital. You're fortunate that the complex is a relatively new building, but at some time will require major repairs. And at that point, we'll be requiring a lot more capital expenditures than are currently happening. And then at the back, one new note number 5, which just talks about the COVID, and obviously with the arena being closed, it's going to have an impact on that in 2020. The magnitude of that impact will be wait to see. And then at the back, there's a schedule breaking down your tangible capital assets by component. And as I mentioned, the building is the largest of those assets, making up about 80% of the total capital. And that's my report for the complex, unless anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions for Christine concerning this? Okay, I guess you can move on to the next report, Christine, please.
Oh, okay, great. So this is your consolidated financial statements for the town. I will remind council that when I say consolidated, we do have a few items that change from what you see on a regular basis. So we consolidate your percentage share of the secondary water board because you are the majority user of that water board. In addition, we consolidate the BIA because it is under the town's consolidation. And then we take out 50% of the complex that we just went through because Malahide owns 1/2 of that. And so we only show 1/2 of those transactions. So just so you're clear on what that consolidation looks like. Again, it's a clean auditor's opinion and it is dated tonight's date, which those charged with governance under Canadian auditing standards would be this council. So once you approve these financial statements, we can complete them and then start completing the FIR, which is sent into the province, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Moving forward to the balance sheet, and as I mentioned, it is a good news story. So I'll highlight the high levels. I know you've seen some of these numbers already, but I will make mention of a few things. So under financial assets, you'll see that last line, investment in Earth Corporation. Earth purchased a new utility in 2019, and because of that, your investment in Earth went up over $1 million. So that increased your assets by that amount. As well, at the end of 2018, the liabilities, that $2.7 million at the end of 2018 had a large outstanding amount regarding Talbot Street, which is coming to an end in 2019. So there wasn't as large of accounts payable at the end of the year. So that net financial assets, as I've mentioned, is kind of the line that I always look at to make sure that you're staying at least stable. And in fact, you've increased $3.7 million. So I'm looking at the $7.7 million at the end of 2018 compared to the $11.4 million in 2019. As I mentioned, just over $1 million of that increase is due to that investment in Earth increase. But the remaining amount of about $2.5 million has been moved over into reserves at the end of the year. So good news story, we've increased our reserves. We haven't taken out any new debt. And then under non-financial assets, I'm always looking to ensure that your tangible capital assets plus your work in progress is increasing as opposed to decreasing. So if you remember, we have amortization each year, which was about $1.6 million. But we want to see us replacing assets at least equal to that amortization amount. And in fact, you exceeded it significantly. And so we're increasing our capital investment, which is obviously the assets you need to have in place to provide the services you do. We've increased our reserves and we haven't taken out any new debt. So as I mentioned, all good news stories, all financial stable indicators, stability indicators. Are there any questions on that statement at all? All right, we'll move on to the revenues and expenditures. So your statement of operations and accumulated surplus. So again, from a high level, I look at revenues and you're about 1.4 million over budget. And that's due to a couple of reasons. One is your supplementary taxes. You can see you had about $300,000 in addition there. User charges, the increase there is really almost all related to water, wastewater, and so that flows through to their own separate surplus, so that doesn't affect the general operating surplus of the town. And then we also, because we were in such a better financial position regarding our bank and cash balances, we also then recorded more investment income. In addition, Earth declared a dividend of which you received your share, and that is not budgeted for because that is something that we're never sure from year to year whether or not Earth is going to declare a dividend. So that's the reason for the increase in revenue. Under expenditures, again, I'll remind council that we don't budget for amortization, and as I mentioned, your amortization was 1.6 million, and so really we were underspent in most areas. Just good fiscal, financial, responsible spending compared to our budget. And so we were able to recognize both with those supplementary taxes, the dividend from Earth, and then just fiscal responsibility, about a 529,000 operating surplus, which shows up in the reserve when we get to that note. So that net operating revenue over expenditures line, I always, again, look at that. So you'll see last year it was just basically a break-even point. This year we're up to 1.6 million. So again, what that indicates to me is that you're able to cover your expenditures plus your amortization from your operating revenues. Everything below that line are revenues that relate to capital projects, and they fluctuate from year to year. You'll see that it would appear that we received more than what we budgeted for, but some of those budgeted amounts were in prior years when we thought those projects would be done. And so we can't recognize that revenue until the actual work is done. So Talbot Street would be a perfect example of that. We finished that up in 2019. We thought we would have it done at the end of 2018 when we originally budgeted anyway to have it done in 2018. Anything I haven't covered that, and again, there's the investment in Earth increase, the 1.17 million. Anything I'm not covering or gives rise to other questions as I've gone through this?
Okay. Are there any questions for Christine?
We've got one at the end, Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question, Christine, and it goes back a little bit to your presentation. The FIR can be prepared after council adopts the reports. Who does the FIR? Do you do it, or does our staff do it?
It's a combination of both. There's certain things that. So I do some of the numbers, and then some of your staff do that. So the numbers were what I would call performance measurement numbers, where we're looking at how many kilometers of water pipe, how many how much water was treated, those kinds of things all come from your staff. The numbers that tie into these financial statements come from my staff. So okay. it's a combination. But your staff still review it and approve it before it's submitted.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Christine? Okay, I guess there aren't any, Christine.
All right, I will take you through a couple other things if you don't mind. If you'd like to go to my note 10, I think this is an important note to just review with council. One more, I think. There we go. So this just breaks down all of the various surpluses and so just basically what makes up your accumulated surplus. So this is a good indicator. So we see obviously of that 78 million, 66 million. So the majority of it is invested in tangible capital assets, which obviously you can't turn around and sell. So it's not like you have liquid cash there. But under the reserves and reserve funds, you'll see that we were able to increase these reserves and reserve funds and continue to plan for the future and save for the future. So these are all, so the tax rate stabilization, as I mentioned, you had about a $529,000 surplus this year. So that's where that went. And then the rest of the reserves continue to be fairly consistent with last year or an increase. And as I mentioned, sanitary sewers and storm sewers and water system reserves, the second one and the third line, are both from the water and wastewater rates. They not contributed to by the general operations. And again, there is a new note to these financial statements on the COVID situation as well. And then at the back, there are the schedules, the first one being the breakdown of your tangible capital assets. And as you can see, the linear assets make up being water, wastewater, storm, and road work make up a significant amount of your 60 million of 90 million. So 2/3 of your capital is in those, which would make sense. The next biggest one being buildings. And then the last schedule that's there sort of reconciles the financial statements as you see them to the FIR that is prepared. And because the FIR is by function, this then shows your revenues and expenditures by function as well. So it just shows you in which areas you're spending the most money. And as you can see, it would be in the areas of protective services, which includes fire, police, and then environmental, which is your water, wastewater, and storm, and garbage. Any questions on any of that?
I don't see any, Christine.
Oh, we have one down here.
Councillor Oslach, did you have a question? Sorry.
Yes, to Christine, Your Worship. Evidently, the town is in pretty good shape. I understand. This is, I think, your either your third or fourth report to this municipality that we're doing quite well, and I think we're in good shape. Would you concede to that?
I would, for sure. Yes. As I said, all the indicators that I look at, making sure you're reinvesting in capital, saving for the future, are all there. And so, yes, I would concede to that myself.
Thank you, Christine.
Are there any further questions or comments for Christine?
I would like to just say thank you to your staff. Lisa especially has been a huge help, and as you can imagine, auditing in COVID has been a bit of a stretch for everybody. And so I just want to say thank you, especially to her, for her excellent work and her timeliness at getting back to us with all of our questions and things like that and providing work for us. So thank you to Lisa and her staff.
We'll make sure that she gets that message, Christine.
Thanks.
Do you have any further things to add, Christine?
I don't.
Okay. Well, we'd like to thank you very much for coming and giving us this great report. It's excellent. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right. You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have the resolution, please?
That council receives the delegation from Christine Scrimger of Scrimger and Company for information, and that council approves the draft Town of Elmer 2019 financial statement as presented, and further, that council approves the draft East Elgin Community Complex 2019 financial statement as presented.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is the public meeting, but that's for 7 o'clock this evening. So what we're going to do is just move along with our agenda, and at 7 o'clock we will stop what we're working on and move right into the public meeting, if that's okay with council. So our next item up is the adoption of council and committee minutes.
That council approves the following minutes. Regular council virtual session held on June 15th, 2020.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is minutes to receive from the Cemetery Board.
That council receives the following minutes. Elmer Cemetery Board held on January 28th, 2020.
Okay, someone to move, someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Ham. Are there any questions or comments about this? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Our next item up is the consent agenda. So there are quite a few items on the consent agenda. Can you read the resolution, please?
That items A to N of the July 13th, 2020 consent agenda be adopted as presented with actions to be taken as noted.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber, Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or comments or any items that you'd like to discuss? Okay, I have a couple of items I want to discuss. One is in relation to the information from CN Rail. I just wanted to update council that I had a meeting with Karen Vecchio about approximately 2 weeks ago, and we had a good discussion about CN Rail. And I explained to her that it's a great economic tool in Aylmer, and that we're very sad to see it go, because we all know we've received the letter that they're going to discontinue the service. But she said she's going to make some calls and she's still going to look into it for us. I know there are other municipalities that are quite concerned at this point. So I'll report back if I hear anything, but I just wanted you folks to know that I have talked to Karen and she is looking into it. Also on the agenda, or for this particular, I'm sorry, I'm not sure which one it is. I think it's M. We got a letter from Steve Clark in regard to how the government's planning to deal with the COVID-19 and coming out of all the problems that arose from that for everyone. So I just wanted you to know that I was involved in a teleconference with Premier Ford and Minister Clark. And so it was an enlightening conversation, because this letter had just come out. And so what they did is they took us through, and all the mayors were in attendance, or most of them, from Ontario. And what they did is they walked us through the entire letter. So they just kind of give us more information, explained why they were doing things and how they were planning to do them. So I just, thought you would find that interesting to know that they took the time to talk to all the mayors about this. So it certainly helps understand it a lot better. So that's just my take on those items. And so no one else has any comments from the consent agenda? Okay, so someone sorry, did I ask for someone to move and second it? I'm sorry if I did or didn't.
Yes, you did, Your Worship.
Okay, all right. So I just wanted to double check that. Okay, so we're ready to vote. So all those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, and the next item up is, I'm getting to the action items. So the first one is a report Corp 2620, and that's the South Street East OPA and ZBA application.
That report Corp 2620, entitled 33 South Street East OPA, so official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application, be received for information, and that council accepts the application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment as complete, and sets August 10th, 2020 as the date for the public meeting, virtual, as required under sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Councillor Ham and Councillor Oslach. Are there any further questions or comments about this? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's pretty straightforward, but could the director give us a snapshot, please?
Certainly. Would you mind giving us some more information, Cale?
Certainly, Your Worship. Through you to the rest of council. This is an application for a property which is a legal non-conforming home that has 4 units currently in it. and 4 units in the single detached neighborhood. They're the single detached dwellings that are normally in that neighborhood. The 4 units is more than what is normally permitted, but it existed prior to our zoning bylaw. It would be permitted to stay as 4 units as long as there was no changes made. However, the owner wishes to add a 5th unit. And so by adding the 5th unit, they're required to bring it into conformity, both with the official plan in terms of the density of that location, with 5 units in a single home, and also to bring it into zoning conformity, which is going to require an amendment from the existing R2.
Okay, are there any further questions for Cale on this? Okay, Councillor Oslach. You're on mute, Councillor Oslach.
This came up a few years ago for the same address, and at that time he wanted to do a basement apartment. Where would this, Cale, where would this unit be? Would it be in the basement like he previously required a number of years ago, requested the town? Where would this unit be?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Oslach, this unit in particular is the exact same unit which he had previously wished to move forward with. And in fact, they have made some construction progress prior to this application.
So basically it would be in the basement.
Yes.
Okay. That's the same application that a number of years ago that they requested. So it's this resurfaced, basically.
Through Your Worship, yes, it has. We did specify the requirements of the official plan amendment to the applicant to make sure that they did a planning justification report and a building code compliance report to identify the areas where the building would be out of compliance with the new building code to ensure that the town is protected.
Thank you, Cale.
Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? I'm sorry, I can't see. Okay, sorry. Yes, that's carried. There's enough in favor of that. Sometimes it's hard to see, and I do apologize to council. The next item up is Report Corp 2720, and it's about Cottonwood Hills Phase 2 application.
That Report Corp 2720, entitled Cottonwood Hills Phase 2 Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application, be received for information, and that Council accepts the application for zoning bylaw amendment as complete and sets August 10th, 2020 as the date for the public meeting, virtual as required under Section 34 of the Planning Act.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Councillor Chapman and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Charlton?
Through Your Worship, so is anything actually changing in the grand scheme of things for the plan for Cottonwood or not?
Okay, could we likely get Cale to answer this one, please? I'm not sure about that.
Sure. Through you, Your Worship, Cottonwood Hills, as we know, changed hands of ownership last year. And since then, they've been working to amend the existing draft approved plan with some small revisions that align with the owner, or the current owner's desire for the development. This is all part of that process. So once they agreed their street layout and the number of units in the development, they apply for final zoning to actually align the zoning with what they intend to build. So this is the first step of phase 2 getting underway, and this will be followed by some submission of engineering designs, and hopefully that is a precursor to moving dirt sometime later this year.
Okay, thank you, Cale. Are there any further questions or comments? I would just like to say this is good news, and it's nice to see this. Also, the types of housing that are included in this is amazing. So there's going to be quite a few options for people in Aylmer when the time comes, and for people from out of Aylmer too. Councillor Osset, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, Your Worship. I'm glad to see this project moving ahead, and like Cale said, we can move dirt this fall. It's been going on for almost, I think, 20 years, hasn't it? So I'm glad that it's moving along, and we need the housing in Aylmer. I think there is about 300 units to be built eventually. So I think it's good news.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslech. Any further comments or questions? Did you have a comment, Councillor Ham? Okay. All right. All those in favor of this report? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is report FIN 1520.
That report, Finance 1520, entitled Quarterly Financial Summary Report, Quarter 2, be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Councillor Barber and Councillor Ham. Are there any questions or comments? Cale, would you care to just maybe give us a bit of an overview of this, please?
Sure, through you, Your Worship. There is it's a very difficult period during COVID-19 to identify the costs and revenues that have been impacted by this pandemic. We have given Council one estimate of potential 2020 impacts. This is just following up on that. Based on the first quarter, we're seeing about $43,000 of COVID-specific expenses that have come. But I will also say that that can't capture all of the costs we've lost in terms of revenues. So things that didn't get bought from us in terms of facility rentals or other things that we would normally be a vendor for, we can't charge what didn't come through the front door to that COVID expense line. So we are seeing some impacts obviously on the revenue side with having buildings closed and different programs not running. But we are trying to cost save where we can. And I did give an estimate there that we are operating currently at the end of the second quarter at about 42% of budgeted expenses and 45% of budgeted revenue.
Okay, thank you, Cale, for that information. From Cale's information, are there any more questions, comments about this? Councillor Charlton.
Through Your Worship, I see that for water purchases, we're only at 8% of our budget. Is that lagging behind, or why is that only 8%? It seems kind of low.
So through you, Your Worship, on water purchases, recall that we purchase our water from the secondary board, and then it comes in as it goes through our statements as a charge to users. Two things are happening. One is we're having to buy less water. I don't know whether I have your 8% number to hand, but with our industry being shut down, we have some high water using industry that was not running at full capacity. Our expected water numbers will be significantly down in 2020. The estimated impact, I believe I delivered, was $140,000 of net proceeds that we would normally gain from water and sewer that we're not expecting in 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Through you, Your Worship, we're at 43%. What would we normally be at this time of year? Because different times of year, we have different expenses. So where would we normally be at the end of this second quarter?
Through you, Your Worship, it's hard for me to say. I've never actually done that analysis on what we've historically run at for the mid-year. However, I would say that you're right to point out our expenses are not evenly distributed over the 12 months, nor are our revenues. With that in mind, many of our expenses are going to be difficult to estimate for the fall, depending upon the period of time which things open or reopen. This is going to be a funny year. So even if historically we've run closer to 50% of expenditures, I don't know what the third and fourth quarter are going to look like, and it's going to be dependent on changes to our provincial requirements under the pandemic as well. The good news is we're just less than 50% for right now, and we're hoping that the rest of the year comes a little bit back to us, and then hopefully the worst is behind us for 2020.
Thank you, Cale. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of this report? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Corp 2820.
That report, Corp 2820, entitled 140 Elk Street Consent Application, be received for information, and that Council supports the County of Elgin Consent Application E1120 and directs staff to complete and forward the municipal appraisal sheet to the Land Division Committee, noting the Town of Elmer requires the following conditions for the proposed Land Division application as presented, and that Council therefore requires that the retained parcel identified in the application be merged with 49639 Talbot Line, and that neither the retained nor the severed parcel be merged with 146 Elk Street as identified in the Land Division Notice of Application as conditions of approval.
Okay, someone to move and second this report? Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman. Cale, could you give us an overview of this? It's a bit confusing.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, it most certainly is. And in fact, it's taken a couple of attempts at the public notice from the Land Division Committee to try and get it squared away as well. So we'll start. This was a parcel that was for sale, and it contains a house, a single detached dwelling lot within the Town of Elmer boundary. And then at the rear lot line of what would be a normal lot on Elk Street, it actually was still joined to about 40 acres of farmland outside of the town boundary. And when this property was sold, the purchaser owns the adjacent farmland and is now wishing to sever the house that is within the town boundary and join the 40 acres of farmland that was formerly part of this lot to the existing parcel next door that they own, which is the 49639 Talbot Line property. The trick with these types of applications is to ensure that the town is not leaving a remnant parcel that has no frontage, or is creating access lanes which are cause of future disruption and complaint in the town. And with this application, the notice was incorrectly identifying the retained farmland as 146 Elk. And that address actually is already occupied by the dwelling to the east of the severed parcel at 140 Elk. So given that the notice went out identifying it as 146 merging with the Talbot Line address, we needed to just specify that the Town of Elmer requires that 146 Elk not be part of this application whatsoever. So it doesn't merge with any of the property. It's in error.
Okay, thank you, Cale. That does sound confusing. Sounds like you have had a lot of work to do on that. Councillor Barber, do you have a question? You're on mute, Councillor Barber.
Okay, I think I have it now. Thank you, Your Worship. To Cale, does this create any boundary issues, or is it has that legality been straightened out?
Through Your Worship, the property contained two property identification numbers or roll numbers for taxation. So Malahide was taxing the farmland, and the Town of Elmer was taxing the portion within our town boundary. So all this land division application does is aligns the actual property boundary with the current taxation boundary. So it's actually makes it more clear rather than less.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Charlton? You're on mute as well, Councillor Charlton.
Yeah, that was an interesting report, but the internet kept cutting out and I didn't get a whole lot of it. The gist of it is that the house is being severed, which had the right of way to the property in Malahide Township that was behind the house. And that property was 40 acres. It was the Learn Farm. It's being joined with the other farmland to the east that has an entranceway off of Talbot Line.
Yes.
And so now the house is always was in Malahide, and the farmland, the house was always in Aylmer, and the farmland was in Malahide, and so that's being severed, and what's Aylmer is Aylmer, and what's Malahide is Malahide's.
Yes, through your worship, the only difference of what Councillor Charlton described, it was never a right of way to the farm. It was literally the frontage of the farm was actually in town through that lot. So there was no legal right of way. It was actually just connected to each other. And now they're separating them to leave one in town and leave the farmland out of town.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Report Corp, and it's 2920.
That Report Corp 2920 entitled Land Sale 45 Progress Drive be received for information, and that council consider giving 3 readings to the bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute the closing documents for the sale of 2.05 hectares on Progress Drive to Home Hardware Stores Limited, and further that council authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement with Home Hardware Stores Limited for an option to purchase an additional 0.81 hectares shown as Part 2 on Reference Plan 11R 10629 for a period of 5 years.
Okay, I need someone to move and second this report. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Barber. Before we discuss this, Cale, do you want to give a bit more information about this report?
Sure, through you, your worship. This has been a long time coming. There's been a lot of work has went in on both sides to identify the future home of Home Hardware in Aylmer. And they're very pleased to move forward with this location just behind the No Frills off of Progress Drive. And as part of the purchase, they are doing 2 interesting things. One is they're retaining a 15-meter access to the north, which will allow them to connect to any future northern roads. Say, for example, if the MTO bypass didn't exist and a town road was there, or some possibility of reaching out to the MTO bypass area. The second thing that they're doing that's interesting is retaining the option, which is a market-priced option for the next 5 years to purchase the additional 2 acres that remains up there further to the north. So, and again, that's a market. It's a market option, so that means it would be sold at the then current market price within the next 5 years. Other than that, we're excited to have them in Aylmer, and we're excited to have a continued investment in Aylmer from Home Hardware, and we look forward to working with them along the site plan process and get them in the ground.
It's definitely great news. Are there any other questions, comments? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank the people at Home Hardware and staff for the perseverance in working through this. It's been challenging, I'm sure, especially during the COVID times and uncertain economic conditions. But to have the faith in the community is superb.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Report Corp 3020.
That Report Corp 3020 entitled Industrial Land Reconveyance 55 Progress Drive be received for information, and that council consider giving 3 readings to the bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute the required documents for the reconveyance of an 8-acre parcel of development land known municipally as 55 Progress Drive from Desmeans Holdings Incorporated. And further, that council authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute any additional documentation which is required by the town's legal counsel to finalize the land transfer prior to the next council meeting.
Okay, I need someone to move and second. Councillor Oslach and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews. Did you want to give us an overview first, Cale, on this report, please?
Sure. Through you, Your Worship. Back in 2018, the town of Aylmer sold 8 acres along Progress Drive for Precision Fab, PFI, to build a new facility. Since that time, a number of changes have happened, including the new North American Free Trade Agreement was agreed, as well as additional shocks to the economy given through the pandemic. This has been a difficult time for PFI to operate through, and they have persevered in their existing location, but this is something they've determined is not the right time to build a new location. And as part of that, they're requesting, they've asked for us to execute our repurchase rights or reconveyance rights under the sale agreement, which allows the town to repurchase land that isn't actually going to be developed within the year. And we purchase it back at 90% to cover our costs associated with the sale, which are not recoverable. So we've had a good relationship with PFI through this process. We had a good discussion on the phone before this report came to council, and we wish them all the best in continuing to grow their company. And we hope that they will come back to us in a year's time and say we'll get under us after all these shocks, and we're ready to move forward to the new facility. And we hope that we can be there for them to help them through that too.
Thank you, Cale. Are there any questions or comments about this? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Report Corp 3120.
That Report Corp 3120, entitled Reopening Plan for COVID-19 Update, be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Councillor Ham and Councillor Charlton. Are there any questions or comments concerning this report? Cale, did you have anything further to offer about this report?
Nothing, Your Worship, in particular, just making council aware of what progress we have made through the control group in reopening some town facilities and kind of where we're at on our roadmap to reopening town facilities. It's just an informational item, and us, like the province, are making slow progress on this.
Okay, thank you, Cale. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report up is OPNS 0520.
That Report Operations 520, entitled Equipment Replacement Chlorine Analyzer, be received for information. And that council endorse the replacement of the chlorine analyzer as detailed in this report. And further, that the overall cost, estimated to be $9,000 plus applicable taxes, is covered from the water reserve.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Charlton. Connor, did you want to give us a bit more information about this report?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Is there anything in particular that you guys would like me to address?
Just could you give us just a bit of an overview on this, please?
Yeah, sure. So our current analyzer, it has a tendency of malfunctioning. It reads an error of a low chlorine. And that's just the result of its age, and it's gone through its life cycle. So given the importance of this equipment, we've sort of deemed it prudent to undertake immediate replacement of the equipment. We estimate the total cost around $9,000. It includes the analyzer, the installation, and also the integration into the SCADA system. And as a result of the alarms coming through, we've taken some extra measures just to ensure that we're providing adequate monitoring of the system, which is a regulatory requirement. So we've been taking additional chlorine residuals throughout the system just to ensure that we're meeting all the regulations until we have the new analyzer installed, which is scheduled for July 23rd as of right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Connor. And by the way, welcome aboard. I think this is your first report to council since you started working for Aylmer, and we're pleased to have you on board with us. Are there any questions for Connor? Okay, I guess we'll vote on this. So all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. All right, our next item up is report OPNS 0620.
That report Operation 620 entitled Capital Project Update, Clarence Street Reconstruction, be received for information, and that council include the Clarence Street Reconstruction Project as a priority capital project in the 2021 budget.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton. Rob, would you like to give us a bit more information on this report, please?
Certainly, Your Worship. As the council recall, they've asked staff to prepare a report and a recommendation on the Clarence Street reconstruction project. So I've listed sort of all the reasons in the report whereby I think it's best that we delay the project until early in 2021. I do realize that this is a priority project for the council. I feel, though, that given the current situation and landscape, it's probably best that we delay prior to starting the work, primarily for the schedule and where we are in the current year. I think any sort of hiccup on the supply chain or a reoccurrence of the COVID or any sort of shutdown because of an emergency would really have a dramatic impact on where the project would sit and what the residents would have to live with if the project was delayed throughout the year.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Any questions or concerns from our council? Councillor Charlton.
Has anyone from Clarence Street commented to any councillors or staff about the delay?
Have you heard anything, Rob?
No, I have not. So the only way they would have been aware is if they've kept an eye on the agenda for the formal notice. If council concurs with staff's recommendation, that would be my next step would be to issue a letter to those residents, letting them know council's decision and that our goal would be to get this project back on track as quickly as we can in 2021. I know there's a lot of residents there that are anxious to see this project finished, and I want to let them know that we just simply haven't letting it slide, but we just need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Are there any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Andrews?
Through you, Your Worship. Just a comment, I think, more than anything. Rob, you raised a really good point that, you know, if this was a project that was to start, and then, you know, if second wave hit, which very well could be a good possibility, and what they would have to live through, I think, would be much, much worse than what they have now, except for if you talk to them, I think they may think otherwise, but I think that's a really good perspective to take it from, so one that maybe others hadn't thought of. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Andrews. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, the next report is OPNS 0720.
That report Operation 720 entitled Award of Project Talbot Street West Traffic Signals be received for information, and that council accept the tender from KWS Electrical Services Incorporated in the amount of $134,661.32 for the Talbot Street West traffic signal project, and further that council authorize the mayor and the chief administrative officer to execute the relevant documents.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Councillor Ham and Councillor Barber. Rob, did you want to just give us a bit more information about this before we have other questions?
Certainly, Your Worship. This is one of the projects that we felt we could proceed with, given that if there was a delay, it's manageable and it doesn't affect a resident directly. So we continued on with this, and of course, this project needs to get completed by the end of the year, as council was successful at getting a grant for like 90% funding for this project. So we did offer it for tender and we closed it. Earth was the low bid, but unfortunately due to some bid irregularities, they were disqualified. So it was then KWS Electrical Services that were the second low bid. Both the engineer and staff, having worked with this contractor in the past, are confident they can complete the work that's shown in the tender documents.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Are there any questions or comments about this? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, the next report is OPNS 0820.
That report, Operations 820, entitled Award of Engineering Services Contract, be received for information, and further that council accept the quote from Theo Vandenberg Construction Incorporated in the amount of $33,640, excluding HST, for the Myrtle Street Bridge repairs work.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Councillor Chapman and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Did you want to add anything to this, Rob?
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. This was one that we hoped to have in front of council earlier this spring, but because of the COVID was delayed. With the bridge work, there's a bit of a timing window. A lot of the bridge contractors can do their major projects when the DFO takes the restrictions off for in-water work. So you do see a lot of the bridge contractors have one or two major projects they're rehabilitating or constructing a brand new bridge. So this is some small work. We were able to contact the contractors again to see if they could undertake the work. We're likely going to have to wait till November now. But I felt that awarding a contractor, making a recommendation to award, would secure us a spot in that next timing window so that we could get the work completed. There will be a few extra additional costs. Mr. Hamilton has reached out and got the contract price. He'll also have to have the engineer come down and do some inspections along the way as they get the false work and the form work completed. I have worked with this contractor in the past, and if he bids your work, you're in good hands.
Well, that's good news, and thank you, Rob. Are there any questions or comments about this report? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Our next report is CAO 5520.
That report, CAO 5520, entitled East Elgin Community Complex Operating and Capital Projects Update, be received for information, and further that staff is authorized to install ice in the Kinsman Arena mid-August in order to be prepared for ice rentals, anticipating the gradual provincial reopening strategies will support recreational activities. It being noted that ice rentals will occur only when permitted by provincial orders.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second the report. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton. Jenny, would you mind just giving us a little bit more information about this report, please?
Certainly, Your Worship, through you to the rest of council. This report was intended really at the time that I drafted it to allow for me to give an update to both Aylmer Council and to Malahide Council. So this was also circulated to the Township of Malahide for their previous meeting. The intention was really because the board was not able to meet just because of the restrictions in numbers. I wanted to ensure that both partners had an updated budget comparison. So that has been provided and attached with this report.
And in addition, the resolution is recommending that we be authorized to install the ice in Kinsman Arena mid-August. And that was in order for us to be ready for what we thought at the time of drafting an eventual reopening of the facility, which looks like as of Friday, some of that may occur already. So this is how quickly things change. You read a report and it's already outdated by the time it gets to council. However, so just a couple of things I did also want to identify here. Because there's been little activity in the arena where the building has been closed, we have undertaken several maintenance projects. So there's been a fresh coat of paint applied throughout the building. When we took the ice out of Kinsman Arena, and that's the pad on the east side, that really hasn't been taken out for a number of years now. We did discover that there were a few cracked boards, and those have been replaced. All of those costs are included in the budget analysis that I've provided you tonight. The overall operating budget sits at about 39%, and we would normally anticipate about 41% at this time of year. So we're looking fairly good there. Just to identify some of the COVID-related impacts, we have right now, we're seeing about 169,000 reduction in revenues over this time last year, which of course will be COVID-related. But on the other side, this has been offset by a partial reduction in expenditures of about 100,000. So overall, not doing too bad with that building having to be closed entirely. We have undertaken or have started to, I think the project is officially completed. The skate tile has been replaced while we've been closed. So that's good news as well. So when we are able to open, that building will be completely set to go. We are anticipating that that building and the control group will be having some discussions this Wednesday in relation to how that building is opened and managing that piece right now. And what we're anticipating is that when the building can be open, will be reduced to a 30% capacity. So although we will be seeing some revenues, there will certainly, we are not going to recover over our revenues over last year. I'm anticipating at any rate, we will not be able to recover. And I did have a note, kind of the last paragraph, that until the province had relaxed its COVID, because of the governance model with the complex and 14 people being around the table, until the province had relaxed its numbers, if you will, for gatherings, we understood that board would not be able to meet. So as I understand from today's announcements, that will actually happen on Friday. So I am hopeful that our next board meeting will be able to move forward as we had originally anticipated, and that was not known at the time of this report. So I think that's all. That's all I have through you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments about this report? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? And that's carried. We're just going to move through some of the items that we can work through till we're waiting for our public meeting. So the first one up is new business and matters of urgency. Okay, I don't see any for that. Inquiries by members. Councillor Oslach. You're on mute, Councillor Oslach.
Sorry about that, Your Worship. I've had inquiries from several businesses in town about wearing masks in their establishments. I noticed that in the paper on Wednesday, you had a thing on the front page about the town's policy about wearing masks. Now, this inquiry came either before that or after that in the paper. So, what is the official policy for the town for wearing masks and in businesses and elsewhere?
Well, I'll try to answer it, and if I don't answer it correctly, I may turn it to Jenny. But first of all, Councillor Oslach, as far as the town of Aylmer goes, it's up to council to actually have a resolution put forward. And if we choose to make that a bylaw that we want everyone to wear masks, that would go through council. But what I said to the newspaper reporter was the fact that at this point, I do not believe there are any municipalities in our area, which is Elgin County, or Southwestern Public Health area, that it's mandatory to wear masks. But when I spoke to the reporter, I said that we should all use common sense, and that when we do visit any kind of a store or any service place or anything like that, we should be wearing masks, especially if we can't social distance. Also, I did suggest to Veronica when I was talking to her that it's up to the store owners as well, because if they don't feel comfortable having customers coming in without masks, I think by all means they should post it and say that they would want you to wear a mask in their store. So that's my take on it. But I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, because Jenny speaks with the public health unit pretty well every day. So maybe I missed something, Jenny. I'm not sure.
Okay, through you, Your Worship, just a couple of additional items. You have covered it pretty well, but just a couple of additional items. In relation to mandatory masks, there's kind of two ways for that to happen. The first way would be for the health unit, and in our case, that's Southwest Public Health, to issue what they call a Section 22 that would require all residents within their reporting area to wear masks when they're out in public. And the health units take those kind of very seriously and would then require that they enforce the Section 22. So in having discussions with Southwest Public Health, they are at this point in time reluctant somewhat to issue a Section 22 because our case numbers in this area have been so manageable and controlled. That's not to suggest that may not happen down the road should our case numbers go up significantly. The other way for this to be managed would be for council to pass a bylaw that would require for residents to wear masks. In that case, then the municipal bylaw enforcement agencies would be required to enforce the bylaw. And of course, at this stage anyway, I wouldn't recommend to council that occur at this stage, just because our numbers are so very low. And as well, as I noted with the Southwest Public Health Section 22, that could change down the road. So if we get a second wave in the fall and it looks or it appears that the numbers are increasing significantly, that may be something that we want to do as part of a slowly reducing our services again. And we'll follow the lead of the province a little bit in relation to that. So, I mean, it is part of our agenda for our emergency control group on Wednesday as well. I did have a discussion with the other CAOs today, specifically in relation to mask wearing. And right now, all of the CAOs' position is that exactly how I described to council as what my recommendation would be, that we not pass a bylaw at this time and wait and see how the case numbers go. It could, that this could change and we may need to increase it, but we're doing a very good job in our area so far in keeping the numbers low. So I don't believe it's something that we need to enact at this stage. You see, and probably all of you, when you go uptown, many people are wearing masks just voluntarily. And I think as the pandemic progresses and we see kind of an increase in cases and the second wave coming or potentially coming, you will likely see that people will voluntarily wear masks. The other issue that you have to be cognizant of is not everybody can wear a mask. And so if there's people with medical issues and which restricts them from wearing a mask, then you get, then you have that conflict between a bylaw enforcement officer and perhaps an elderly person or somebody with health issues who really can't wear a mask. And doctors are not required to issue notes to people who are not able to wear the mask. So it's not really a perfected science at this stage. So if our numbers were significantly higher than they are, I probably would recommend to council that we look at a bylaw, or we might want to encourage Southwest Public Health to issue a Section 22 as well. But hopefully that answers the question, Councillor Oslach.
Thank you, Jenny. My second question is, according to today at 1 o'clock, Premier Ford said that we are entering stage 3. Now, all the rules and regulations haven't been set down. They're working on them because we're open. Stage 3 will be opening on Friday, I think at 12 a.m. or something. But I'm interested in finding out if all these rules and regulations for instance, 50 people in bars and restaurants and all these things, people associating with all these things, who is going to police that? I would assume that the Southwest Health Unit will do that. I don't see the town of Elmer doing it, and I don't see our police services doing it. So who is in charge of that?
Through you, Your Worship.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Certainly. Again, Councillor Oslach, we don't have a lot of detail to date on the stage 3 reopening, but I would anticipate it would be the same as the stage 1 and the stage 2 enforcement responsibilities did fall to the municipalities. So in our case, then every municipality will be different based on what their climate is, what kind of services are within the boundary of the municipality. In Elmer's case, we probably have a little bit more going on because we're more urban in nature. So the enforcement did fall mainly to police and bylaw enforcement. So I would anticipate that the stage 3 reopening will also fall to police and bylaw. Now, having said that, when we found instances where orders were not being followed, we did report those to Southwest Public Health, and it was a bit of a dual, they assisted. So much of what has happened in the past is they tried to handle those types of things as public education. So Southwest Public Health did reach out to whether it was an agency or a group of people who weren't following the orders appropriately, and they did try to educate those folks in relation to what they should and shouldn't be doing during different stages of the pandemic. So, I mean, I think it's probably a bit of both, if you will.
Okay. Further to that, for instance, if we have a incident, who do we report it to? the town or the health agency?
When you say incidents, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
We have somebody who contravenes the rules and regulations.
Okay. Yeah. So again, so what normally will happen, and you saw when the provincial issued, or the province, issued the stage 1 opening, there were orders issued, and then there were phone numbers provided for people to call if things were not being followed. So I am anticipating we'll get some of the same type of information. So if businesses are opening and the businesses aren't following the provincial orders as it relates to the numbers, or if individuals who are visiting a business are not following, typically then they would call the Southwest Public Health. Southwest Public Health would try to work through this public education piece and give them the information that they need in order to appropriately manage their opening or their in this case, what you're probably looking at is a restaurant reopening or a bar reopening. So there will be a bit of a trial and error period as we reopen, and as the businesses try to or start to develop an understanding for how they are to operate. When they are not able, when they get past the public education and whatnot, then there may be charges issue if the infraction continues, if you will.
Thank you, Jenny.
Are there any further inquiries by members? Okay, statements and committee reports. Okay, seeing none. Report of the mayor. I shared with you some of the meetings that I've attended, but I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Deputy Mayor Andrews. On June the 25th, I was invited to attend a meeting with Jeff Urick, Karen Vecchio, and the mayors from the surrounding area. We've been doing this quite often, I'd say 2-3 times during the COVID-19, just to, give each other updates and to understand what was going on in our other communities in Elgin County. And I wasn't able to attend, and I really thank Sherry, Councillor Andrews, for attending for me and reporting back to me what was at the meeting. So that was great, and I really appreciate that. So I'll have the clerk correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe we've done all the parts of the meeting that we're allowed to do at this point. And so basically we will be doing the public meeting at 7 o'clock. Josh, have you got anything further to add?
Through your worship, no, I don't. You're correct. At this point, at your call, we'll recess until 7 p.m. for the calling of the public meeting.
Okay, so we will recess till about 1 minute to 7, and then at that point we will start the public meeting. Okay, we're all back, so the meeting is now reconvened. Josh, could you please read the resolution?
Yep. Sorry, just one moment here. That council do now commence a public meeting under the Planning Act at 7 o'clock p.m. to receive input from the public with respect to the proposed amendment to the town's zoning bylaw 5799 for lands known municipally as 211 Talbot Street East in the town of Elmer.
Okay, I need someone to move and second that, please. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Oslach. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Take notice that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Aylmer will hold a virtual public meeting on Monday, July 13th, 2020, commencing at 7 p.m. to consider a proposed amendment to the Town of Aylmer zoning bylaw 5799 under Section 34 of the Planning Act. The lands affected by the zoning bylaw amendment are located on the north side of Talbot Street East between Queen Street and Elgin Street, comprising Lot 17, Registered Plan 74, and known municipally as 211 Talbot Street East in the town of Aylmer. The subject lands comprise 2 lots recently created by the Elgin County Land Division Committee. Application E89-19. The westernmost lot has an area of 394.5 square meters, a frontage of 9.5 meters, and a depth of 41.5 meters. The easternmost lot has an area of 440.8 square meters, a frontage of 10.6 meters, and a depth of 41.5 meters. Both lots are occupied by 1 unit of a semi-detached dwelling with the common wall between the 2 units forming the lot boundary. The amendment to the zoning bylaw changes the zoning on the 2 lots from residential office RO to site-specific residential office RO9 to permit the creation of the 2 aforementioned lots, each to accommodate 1 unit of the existing semi-detached dwelling. Permitted uses of the RO zone include and are not limited to a single detached dwelling, a semi-detached, a duplex dwelling, a home occupation, and an accessory use. The proposed RO9 zoning will establish new minimum lot area, lot frontage, and interior side yard standards to reflect the existing development on the above noted lots. The lands are designated office residential in the town of Aylmer official plan. Use of the subject lands will be in accordance with section 4.3.4 and all other applicable policies. Any person may attend the virtual public meeting and has had the opportunity to make written or verbal representation in support of or in opposition to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment as outlined in the notice of public meeting. The virtual public meeting is currently available on the homepage of www.aylmer.ca. If a person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of the corporation of the town of Aylmer in respect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment does not make additions at a meeting or make written submissions to the corporation of the town of Aylmer before the proposed zoning bylaw, a local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss all or part of the appeal. Council will hear comments in the following order. First, from the applicant or agent. Second, from the Director of Corporate Services, and that'd be any questions or additional comments based on council questions. The public. Individuals are asked to clearly state their name and address for the record of the clerk, and the clerk will give comments if they have additional communications received with respect to this application. And finally, the Director of Corporate Services will clarify if needed. So we'll start first with the applicant agent, and I'll ask the clerk, have you heard from the applicant agent? Are they planning on attending this meeting?
Through your worship, the applicant did not wish to attend this meeting and will not be speaking to the application tonight.
Okay, thank you. Now, council, do you have any questions for the Director of Corporate Services? Councillor Charlton.
Through your worship. So this is all said and done. This is just kind of a rubber stamping on things. It's not going to change anything. Is that right?
Kale, would you like to answer Councillor Charlton's question, please?
Through you, your worship, yes. There's a couple of things that will change, and I'll give you it in a nutshell. The residential office designation allows a semi-detached dwelling to all be on the same lot. So 2 units on 1 lot. So the lot minimum sizes that we require in our zoning bylaw are meant to fit both halves of the semi-detached dwelling. Through this consent process, they're looking to divide that and only have 1/2 of the dwelling on the lot. and the current residential office doesn't allow lots to be that small. This is a newly built semi-detached dwelling, but what this does change is allows only 1/2 of a semi to be on its own independent lot and to have a lot line down the dividing wall of the semi-detached. That's the only change that would be happening here. They're not going to construct anything different. It is newly developed, and the consent to divide is already approved, subject to the rezoning being taken care of.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, I'll go back to the clerk and ask if there are any individuals from the public that asked to be have a chance to speak this evening.
Through your worship, there were not. The only correspondence that was received with regard to the application came from the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority, noting that they had no issues with the application.
Okay, thank you. Can we take a brief recess? I've got a problem with my computer and I don't want it to have problems like I did the last meeting. So can we just take maybe 5-minute recess so I can attend to my computer? Thank you. I'm back and I apologize for that, but I didn't want the same thing to happen as last meeting. Okay, I guess we have no members of the public, so the clerk, do you have anything to add?
Through your worship, the only, as mentioned, the only additional correspondence was from the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority. I jumped the gun on the last message that I had provided there, and you know, I'd indicated that they noted that they had no issue with the application before us tonight.
Okay, thank you. And Director of Corporate Services, do you have anything further to add?
Nothing further at this time, Your Worship.
Okay, I'll ask for the motion to adjourn the public meeting.
That council do now adjourn the public meeting at 7:09 p.m.
Okay, someone to move it? Councillor Chapman, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Andrews. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to, I believe it's suspending procedural policies.
Through your worship, if I may, just had one additional resolution with regard to receiving report Corp 2520.
Okay.
I'll read that.
All right.
For you.
Thank you.
Corp 2520 entitled 211 Talbot Street East Zoning Bylaw Amendment Analysis be received for information, and that council consider giving 3 readings to the zoning bylaw amendment for 211 Talbot Street East to change from a residential office to a site-specific residential office, R09 zone, to allow for the additional permitted use of 1/2 of a semi-detached dwelling on a reduced lot size.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Ham. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. So I believe the next item is suspend.
That council suspends the procedural policies to proceed with first, second, and third readings of Bylaw 3520, being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 5799, relating to 211 Talbot Street East in Elmer. And then my apologies, we've got bylaw 3620, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the closing documents for the sale of 2.05 hectares on Progress Drive to Home Hardware Stores Limited. And we've got bylaw 3720 to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the required documents for the reconveyance of an 8-acre parcel development land known municipally as 55 Progress Drive from Desmean Holdings Incorporated.
Okay, someone to move and second the report. Councillor Chapman and Deputy Mayor Andrews, any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. And so 3 readings is next.
That council gives 3 readings to bylaw 3520, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 5799 relating to 211 Talbot Street East in Elmer. Bylaw 3620, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute closing documents for the sale of 2.05 hectares on Progress Drive to Home Hardware Stores Limited. And bylaw 3720 to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the required documents for the reconveyance of an 8-acre parcel development land known municipally as 55 Progress Drive from Desmean Holdings Incorporated.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Councillor Chapman, any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. And the next item up is meeting closed to the public.
That council moves into a meeting closed to the public at 7:12 p.m. for the purpose of considering litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality.
Okay, someone to move and second. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Oslach. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. And we'll probably need about 2 or 3 minutes to get ready to go into closed session. Thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.